factors undermining peace in the region include absence of any effective regional security mechanism, economic and cultural integration, mainly caused by hegemonic influences, find incentives to undertake unilateral measures and engage in active conflicts, enabling an environment which is rife with cooperation. Hence, I expect that peace in the region will remain in the doldrums in the foreseeable future as no resolution is in sight. Let me now turn to the crux of the matter, that is the Indian strategic design and highly offensive overtures which threaten the prospect of peaceful resolution of Kashmir. The first being abrogation of Article 370 and 35A not only violates UN Security Council resolution and bilateral agreements, but also Indian domestic law. Hence, a political dispute has erupted which prevents conflict resolution of any kind. This situation is unacceptable to Pakistan. Unprecedented and repression and human rights violation in Indian-held Kashmir is likely to lead to violence, fuel indigenous uprising, and increasing tensions even further. Indian-held Kashmir is virtually a garrison with the largest concentration of security forces anywhere in the world. The numbers are staggering, as is obvious from these few slides. These are the Air Force. Next, the Northern Air Command. Next, please. Next. So, in all, nearly 800,000 law enforcement agencies. These forces, military forces, have the inherent potential to be employed against Pakistan, especially given the aggressive outlook of Indian political and military leadership. The most recent statement by Indian Prime Minister is a case in point of unabated warmongering by India. As the Prime Minister also says, a false flag operation or a misunderstanding blaming Pakistan could trigger a conflict which could spiral out of control. Militarily, India has adopted a belligerent attitude in that it has abandoned its no first use policy, developed tactical and strategic delivery systems for the nuclear arsenal, MIRVing, and acquired the ballistic missile defenses. They have also nuclearized Indian Ocean with plans to have at least 5 SSBNs. Only recently, India has tested sub-launched nuclear-tipped 3,500 kilometers range K4 missile. As a part of its strategy of full spectrum dominance, developing conventional warfighting options to dominate all rungs of escalation ladder, including the limited use of nuclear assets. Unbridled military spending on high-tech equipment has further disturbed conventional balance between India and Pakistan. The defense budget for the current year for India has an outlay of over rupees 7,100 billion compared to just about 1,100 billion for Pakistan. It continues to espouse conventional conflict under nuclear overhang with cold start doctrine, proactive operations, surgical strikes, etc. As a result, it has lowered the threshold for using conventional military instrument, which undermines the strategic stability. India is engaged in a war by proxy on Pakistan soil. Many of the terrorist incidents and insurgents have a clear Indian footprint. India is using cross-domain strategic coercion, that is employing diplomatic, economic, information levers for compellence, as Pakistan remains somewhat vulnerable in these domains. FATF is an apt description of this phenomena, where India is hell-bent to get Pakistan listed on the blacklist. Now, a few words about the nuclear flashpoint, which you often hear. Faced with existential threat and ever-widening asymmetry in conventional realm, Pakistan had no choice but to develop strategic nuclear deterrence, which has served our security interests well to date. However, like other nuclear-armed states, we have often been faced with policy challenges that stability-instability paradox creates. Pakistan is therefore almost obligated to lend credence to the threat of use of nuclear weapons in the event of conventional attack, thus inducing strategic instability. but it is necessary for improving our overall deterrence value. However, given the massive damage that could be caused in case of nuclear exchange, the ramifications will not be limited to Indo-Pakistan, but the entire world. Hence, Kashmir is often and rightly regarded as a nuclear flashpoint. India's strategic elite continues to treat Pakistan deterrence as a bluff. The February 2019 crisis between India and Pakistan has proven that the traditional lessons and concepts of nuclear strategic history have been undone by India, rendering strategic environment of South Asia unpredictable. India's obstinate strategic adventurism can make nuclear pessimist nightmare of Kashmir becoming a nuclear flashpoint a horrible reality. Now, very briefly, the domestic convulsions. Ever since assumption of power by Modi government in 2014, India's domestic environment has undergone radical rightward shift. As policy of its aggressive pursuit of Hindutva, Modi government has consciously cultivated forces of Hindu extremism and provided them space to carry out violent campaign against Muslims, Christians, and other minorities. As a consequence, India has become the most intolerant society, and according to World Press Freedom Index of Reporters Without Borders, India was ranked in 2018 136th out of 180 countries, even below Afghanistan, Palestine, and Myanmar. Jammu and Kashmir is witnessing months of curfew and brutal violation of human rights by law enforcement agencies and Indian authorities. This domestic trend towards violent extremism has been accompanied by state-sanctioned hate campaign against Pakistan. Political and domestic agenda of Modi government has all but eroded any chance of peace and stability in South Asia. The Citizen Amendment Act and National Population Register has exacerbated an already explosive situation. The much touted mantra, I feel, of the largest democracy and secular state as enshrined in Indian Constitution is dead and buried for good. Ladies and gentlemen, peace and stability is not only marred by the military threat alone, but a host of non-traditional challenges add to the fragility of peace. The premier non-traditional threats that emanate from Kashmir, which cannot be underestimated at any cost, include the water security and human security, and I will not go into any further details. So a summary of mix of external and internal factors that have negative impact on South Asian strategic security and stability are summarized here. Now finally, to conclude, the impact of Jammu and Kashmir dispute on regional and global security are undeniably multifaceted. The recent moves of India to annex the disputed territories of Jammu and Kashmir, along with its attempts to alter the ethnic, religious, and social demography, will entail serious consequences both at regional and global scale. Given the seriousness and gravity of the situation at hand, Committee of Nations cannot afford to be bystanders since the stakes and costs are both too high. To avert the tailspin of crisis, a collective international intervention from major powers and international community is needed to compel India to resolve this travesty in the light of UN resolutions. The ultimate right of self-determination, liberty, freedom, and democratic right of people of Jammu and Kashmir to determine their future without having any change to their status by BJP's despot designs. I am of the view that our strategic geography, important demography, and strategic capability and alliance with China, Pakistan cannot be easily be outmaneuvered by India. Given the threat posed to Pakistan, we should continue to develop our military capability to deter and, if necessary, give a befitting response to Indians' aggressive designs without getting into an arms race. Importantly, though, is the pressing need to back a triad of nuclear deterrence with economic and informational prowess to deal effectively with the demands of modern warfare. I feel ultimately both India and Pakistan as nuclearized armed nuclear armed neighbors will have to revert to a negotiated settlement of Kashmir issue. We as a nation are prepared to do whatever it takes to achieve this goal. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. I would now kindly request Ambassador Afra Syab Hashmi to please take the floor and deliver his presentation.
My presentation would be tempered with my personal experiences of having dealt with India for about 16 years, 17 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and having lived in New Delhi in diplomatic capacity as Deputy High Commissioner and First Secretary with my family for more than 7 years. We used to interact on Kashmir with the Kashmiris. The decision by Mr. Narendra Modi in respect of Kashmir taken on 5th of last year, September, it is important to understand that it has long-term repercussions. It is something very, very serious that has happened in terms of integration of Jammu and Kashmir into the Indian Union by removing the relevant clauses from the Indian Constitution. I can say from personal experience that the alienation in Kashmir with regard to India is now complete. Now it is total. Yes, earlier situation was different. At the time of the partition, there were certain Kashmiri leaders. They opted to side with India. Sheikh Abdullah opted for friendship with Mr. Nehru, the Indian Prime Minister. Majority of the people of Kashmir stood for friendship with Pakistan. In terms of joining Pakistan, since we've got foreign diplomats here, just to give a brief background, the matter was taken to the United Nations by India, not by Pakistan. And then a war took place in 1948, resulting in prolongation of the issue. And then other things started to happen. The first Prime Minister of India, Mr. Nehru, gave a public pledge to the world and to the people of Jammu and Kashmir that plebiscite will be held in accordance with the UN resolutions, the crux of the UN resolutions, but that did not take place. Now, as the situation stands, the alienation is there. I sometimes wonder how come Mr. Farooq Abdullah, the son of Mr. Sheikh Abdullah, Mr. Umar Abdullah, the grandson of Sheikh Abdullah, how would they feel? Because they have been siding with India, not with Pakistan. Now, why did all this happen? Do we and the world actually fully understand the repercussions of what has happened in India? I don't think so. Because India has changed the father of the nation of India, Mr. Gandhi. We understand that perhaps India is of Mr. Gandhi, of Mr. Nehru, but that is not the case now. India has become a country which is far more radicalized in respect of religion, in terms of society, than what the world is perceiving India to be. There is something called Hindutva. The foreign diplomats here, I thought just to focus on this aspect. There's a difference between nationalism and fundamentalism in respect of Islam, in respect of Christianity, in respect of Buddhism, in respect of Judaism, and especially in respect of Hinduism. Now, India is not the country of Nehru and Gandhi. There was a gentleman by the name of Nathuram Godse at the time of the partition in 1947. He belonged to a party called RSS, and he assassinated the father of nation of India, Mr. Gandhi. Why did he assassinate? He assassinated because he thought that Mr. Gandhi is soft on Muslims of the subcontinent, because he thought that Mr. Gandhi is soft towards the concept of Pakistan. And today, people who rule India actually sympathize with the assassin, Mr. Nathuram Godse, and not Mr. Gandhi. Now, who's Nathuram Godse? Nathuram Godse belonged to an organization in India by the name of Rashtriya Savayam Sevak Sangh. In short, acronym RSS. It stands for Hindutva, Hindu fundamentalism, which by mistake, deliberately or undeliberately, the West described as Hindu nationalism. Hindu nationalism is something which was followed by Gandhi. Hindu fundamentalism is something which is being followed by RSS, Rashtriya Savayam Sevak Sangh, established in September 1925. The crux of their thought process relates to countering other foreign influences in the subcontinent, especially the Muslims and the Christians and even the Sikh community in India. When we look at RSS, their ideologues, Savarkar, he has a big name in fundamentalist Hindu mindset. Hedegeware, the person who established this organization, they had been describing Muslims as the hissing snakes in the subcontinent. They had deep connections with the Nazis. They derived their ideology, their inspiration from Benito Mussolini. This party was banned by the British just because of the connectivity with the Nazis. And then RSS was banned by the first Prime Minister of India, Mr. Nehru, after the assassination of the father of nation of India, Mr. Gandhi. And this party was banned again by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in the 70s. And later on, this party was again banned when Babri Masjid was attacked in early 1990s in India. Almost each and every Prime Minister of India has been critical of the RSS, except Mr. Modi himself, and except the earlier Prime Minister of India at that time, who also belonged to RSS. And then BJP is that party that emanates from the ideology of the Rashtriya Savayam Sevak Sangh. These are those points which have to be noted. What are the objectives of this RSS. They derive their roots from the Muslim invasions, from their view of history. For instance, they would say that 900-year Muslim rule of the subcontinent was disastrous for Hinduism in India. They have concocted their own history with regard to the Taj Mahal. They say that it was Tejumala, a Hindu temple, on which the Muslim Emperor Shah Jahan constructed this building. They have their own view with regard to their past. And Mr. Narendra Modi is one of the most important proponents of this Hindutva ideology. If you look at the characteristics of Mr. Modi, he belongs to the state of Indian state of Gujarat. Gujarat is adjacent to Pakistan. Gujarat has deep connectivity with Pakistan in terms of issues that have been discussed with India in terms of Sir Creek. Aurangzeb Alamgir is one of the most hated names in India. Aurangzeb, just for the information of the distinguished diplomats, he was the last great Mughal emperor, and the Sikhs in India have very negative views about Aurangzeb Alamgir. And he was born in the Indian state of Gujarat. Patil, Sardar Patil, another important character. Our father of nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who created Pakistan. And then the Indian father of the nation, Mr. Gandhi, all have connectivity with the Indian state of Gujarat. So all these things are noted whenever we go and then try to study the personality of Mr. Narendra Modi. It is said that this phenomenon of Hindu fundamentalism in India is something which is transitory. Sometimes people do ask us whether you think that it will go back. When ideological feelings or frustrations come out of the bottle, as they say, when the ideological genie comes out of the bottle, it's not very easy, to be very frank, to allow it or to force it to go back. Nazism, after the First World War, it became popular, it became an ideology which became very strong. Zionism, you can say, you can look at it. Islamic fundamentalism, we can focus on that. We can focus on the Buddhist fundamentalism. Perhaps the world is heading towards religious fascism. These are those aspects which we have to understand. Senior diplomats, senior scholar diplomats have expressed the view that the world is not really heading in the right direction. The young diplomats sitting here, when they assume senior responsibilities in their respective ministries of foreign affairs, perhaps you would be required to deal with much more a serious world than what we have seen when we were young. Now, what should we do? What can be done with regard to all this, especially the issue of Jammu and Kashmir? One very important thing has happened. Division within India. The thing started from Kashmir, and then the relevant laws coming to the fore in India, Muslims feeling insecure in the subcontinent, especially under Modi in India. If I may be allowed to say, India, in respect of the future, can face existential threat. You see, when you talk to an Indian, they will say that we are an old country. Yes, they have been quite an old country, but they have never been a one country. India has never been a one country except during the time of the British, for only 90 years. Yes, 190 years if you include Bengal and everything, but if you include Pakistan, then India has been a one country only for 90 years. And earlier, during the time of Alauddin Khilji, that was the time when India was a one country. Otherwise, South Asia has been consisting of different countries, different states, different principalities. This is something which one has to understand. Because if I say that Europe is England and England is Europe, that is wrong. Because Europe is England, France, Germany. You know, in France they speak French, in Germany they speak German, Italians speak their language, Spaniards are different. In the subcontinent, Punjabis are different, Bengalis are different, Sindhis are different, people from other Andhra Pradesh, from Deccan, South Tamils, they are different. So South Asia, since time immemorial, has been having different states, different rulers. So I'm not painting a very bleak picture with regard to India. I'm not saying that this is going to happen very soon, not at all. But cracks are there. Cracks are there. And it is something very serious which Mr. Modi is doing in respect of Hindutva. You see, Mr. Modi is not a one-man party as such. He has his cabinet. He came into power not through dictatorship but through democracy. Democracy means that so many people in India actually support the Hindu fundamentalist ideology of the RSS. And the support was always there. The support with regard to RSS in India has always been there. But it gradually came up. Some people sometimes say that the civil society in India would actually be able to overcome all this with the passage of time. I would not agree with that conclusion. I think that RSS is too strong. It has the total population of New Zealand, where I was serving earlier, is 4.8 million. The total number of registered members of RSS is more than 6 million. Well, and RSS is a very secretive sort of an organization. They do not really publicize their achievements. They have so many secret achievements with regard to the Muslims. When in early 2002, when Gujarat riots took place, RSS members were responsible for the assassination, pogroms, murder, rapes of around 10,000 Muslim men and women. In East Pakistan in 1971, they played a very important role. They want to play, and they are playing a very important role even now in the Indian-held Kashmir. But the only thing is that the international media does not talk of it. Our scholars do not really focus on all this. Mani Shankar Iyer, the former Minister for Petroleum, once he criticized the RSS, taking cue from another minister of the Union Cabinet of the Government of India who had criticized the RSS. And Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer said that at least he has the guts to speak against RSS. It's not that easy to criticize this important organization in the subcontinent. We in Pakistan, I think this is one of the very important illustrations, manifestations in respect of holding seminars to create awareness with regard to the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Our media is doing an effective job in terms of apprising the people of Pakistan about the developments in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Our Foreign Office has to maintain its momentum with regard to the issue at the multilateral level, at the United Nations, at the OIC. This is something which has to be there. Then scholars should write books, authentic, well-researched books for the posterity on Kashmir, on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, what is happening in Kashmir. This is something very important, so that the scholars at the international level at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, they are able to quote these incidents. Lastly, we feel that the two-nation theory on which Pakistan was based and is based has become much more strong today. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people had started to question the validity of this concept. But now, when Muslims are being persecuted in India, the Muslims in Pakistan carefully are watching what is happening to the Muslims in India. And this is not only the case in Pakistan. The Muslims in Bangladesh are also watching all this very carefully. And the world over, it will have its own impact. Let's see what is going to happen in future. But major developments are taking place. Hitler had floated the idea of nationalistic nationalism in terms of Nazism. We are perhaps heading, not we, when I say we, I would say the world today, we are heading towards religious fascism, which we will have to confront, deal with effectively tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will now proceed. It will be an honor to request the session chair, Senator Moshad Hussain, for his keynote address.
In the name of the Almighty, the Lord of all mankind. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Assalamu alaikum to our Muslim countries' representatives. The President of the IPRI, Islamabad Policy Research Institute, His Excellency Admiral and Ambassador, and a very successful ambassador, by the way. Normally they say the military men don't make good diplomats, but he's an exception. Maybe because he's from the Navy. Admiral Asham, old friend. And of course, one of the best and the brightest in the Pakistan Foreign Ministry, Ambassador Afrasiab, Mehdi Hashmi. The last time I heard about Mehdi Hashmi was Rafsanjani. So you have a common name with him. And I would also like to recognize two distinguished gentlemen from the think tank community who are sitting in the front rows. Air Chief Marshal Kaleem Sadat, who also are very outstanding. Both are thinking generals, because from the Air Force and the Navy. And Rana Athar Saab from the Pakistan House. And a very warm welcome to the distinguished ladies and gentlemen from friendly countries of Asia and Africa, Solomon Islands to the Sudan, Afghanistan to Zambia, Palestine to Mauritania. It's really a pleasure to welcome you all to Pakistan. And I've been to many of your countries, and In my short presentation, I would like, since you are also from the diplomatic corps, and I started my career after I came from America, training Pakistani diplomats. So a few foreign secretaries and others have been my students. The current foreign secretary is a student of my wife, who is a professor of history, Dr. Sohail Mahmood, and a very
So
distinguished.
your wife has done a better job.
Yes, she's done a better job. Yes, certainly. She's the better half also. And I would like to first give you the context of Pakistan, then talk of a little bit of geopolitical impact, because we have had two very learned presentations about the aspects of occupied Kashmir, whose annexation on 5th August is reminiscent. And I believe somebody from Ukraine is also here. Is somebody from Ukraine here? Yes, sir. You know how Russia occupied, annexed Crimea. That's exactly what has happened. Except the hue and cry on Crimea was huge. But Crimea and Kashmir are different. Crimea is in Europe, Kashmir is here. Perhaps there's also, I won't say because of religion, but sometimes we have double standards. And religion does come into play. You mentioned Islamophobia, sir. I was information minister of Pakistan when we became a nuclear state. And I was the principal spokesman of Pakistan. And I was in a television program with an Indian general, a live show, BBC, South Asian Survey. And suddenly he said, "Oh, you Pakistanis, you have the Islamic bomb." I said, "General, I never realized that bombs also have religions." Because by that reckoning, I said, then India has the vegetarian bomb. We have the Islamic bomb. So you see, this brings into that aspect of religiosity also. But this is what has happened. Annexation, trying to say might is right. But as Afrasiab Saab said, the ambassador, that has opened up consequences which the Indian state cannot control. There are 17 different insurgencies in India, apart from occupied Kashmir, which I think is a war of liberation under international law. Because the UN Charter sanctions wars of liberation. And those insurgencies are now going to be more active, because Modi has opened up such an element which has divided India, damaged India, and the centrifugal forces are going to be asserting themselves in the course of time. First of all, I'd like to just briefly give you a profile of Pakistan. You mentioned foreign policy of Pakistan. Pakistan has a history of being, from day one, our empathy, our support with the oppressed. This is an issue of principles. I've traveled in the Maghreb. I went to Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria. Of course, Mauritania is also part of that. And I was very impressed that in a lot of these countries, there are roads, highways named after the founding fathers of Pakistan. And I asked them, how come? And they said, and this is a part of history, in the 50s, Habib Bourguiba, the father of modern Tunisia, traveled on a Pakistani passport when they were fighting a war of liberation against French colonialism. Farhat Abbas, the Prime Minister of the government in exile of Algeria, traveled on a Pakistani diplomatic passport in the 50s. Morocco, we supported. I was in Morocco, and I was in Rabat, and I went for the Jummah prayers in the big mosque of Rabat, and I got 2-3 invites for people who were just offering prayers, and they introduced me to their families at homes. They said Pakistan has been a brother and a friend supporting us at Liberty. Africa. We were the first to support ZANU, PF. Zimbabwe African National Union Popular Front. Mugabe, he came here, we gave arms. Mandela, Nelson Mandela, the great freedom fighter. I had the honor of being his minister in waiting when he came to Pakistan in 1999 with his daughter. And we supported South Africa, struggle for liberation. Today, if you go to the leading institutions in Pakistan for military training, you will find cadets of Palestine. The first time the PLO the Palestine Liberation Organization, led by Yasser Arafat, received international recognition was in Pakistan. April 1974, the PLO was recognized as the sole legitimate representative of the people of Palestine at the Islamic conference hosted by Prime Minister Bhutto in Lahore. 6 months later, the Arab League in Rabat, October 74, reaffirmed their decision. The Arab League recognized him, but it was here. So, and our pilots, he's a very distinguished chief of the air staff, and our Air Force is probably one of the best air forces in the world, professionally and otherwise. Our two pilots fought in the October 1973 Arab-Israeli war as part of the Syrian Air Force and shot down the two Israeli jets which were shot down in the war. It was Pakistani pilots. So we have had a history of struggle and support. So, and in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Pakistan had no interest there. Pakistan had no Pakistanis there. We had no economic interests. When they were victims of ethnic cleansing in 1992, we were the first country, now we can say that openly, to break the so-called embargo of the United Nations and supported them. And I had the honor of visiting Bosnia in December 1993 when they were fighting the War of Liberation, and I met their president, Ali Izetbegovic, whose son Bakr is now the president. And he gave me a book. It was called Islam Between East and West. And he said the book is dedicated to Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. That was the book of Ali Izetbegovic. He wrote it in 1970 as a lawyer. But look at the impact. He's the national poet of Pakistan. So, and of course, Afghanistan we have fully supported, and we have hosted the largest number of refugees for the longest period in world history. And so we have had a history of struggle, of support. And when we come to modern times, we were the first to support Sri Lanka when they were fighting the LTTE, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, which was sponsored by the Indian intelligence RAW. And we have always supported, we built the parliament in Maldives. And then we also have supported the struggle of the Nepalese people against Indian bullying and hegemonism. Because Nepal was suffered under blockades by the Indians. So it's so this is our track record. It's very clear. So when we talk of empathy with Kashmir, it's not just lip service. It's a certain principled commitment to a cause, because the United Nations Charter, the United Nations resolutions say so. And the last UN resolution which mentions Kashmir by name was Resolution 1172 of June 6, 1998, which was unanimously approved by the United Nations Security Council in the aftermath of the nuclearization of South Asia, and where they said that there should be a dialogue between India and Pakistan to remove the root cause of tensions. This is the UN Resolution 1172, June 6, 1998, as 20 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk of Kashmir, we talk at a time when the world is being transformed. And three such transformations, globally, regionally, and are relevant for Pakistan and for the future of this region, which hosts 1.5 billion people, 1/5 of humanity resides in South Asia. The first is the shift in the global balance of economic and political power away from the west to the east, which Admiral Saab alluded to also. The west, as we know, is US, Europe is in decline. There's a resurgence of Asia, led by China. So that is one huge transformation. Probably in the last 100 years, this is the most significant transformation in global politics. Second, where Pakistan is located. And in this regard, I would like to mention the quotation of the great leader, the father of the nation, the founder of Pakistan, Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He was asked soon after the creation of Pakistan in his first interview with a foreign journalist, which appeared in America's Life magazine The journalist was an American woman journalist, Margaret Bork White. And this interview is a cover story of Life magazine, and you can access it on Google. 5th January 1948, Life magazine. And the interview was given in October 1947, soon after the creation of Pakistan. She asked him, what is the future of Pakistan? What is Pakistan's role going to be? And at that time, Pakistan had a war with India. Indian aggression was there. There was influx and exodus of people. 10 million population was exchanged after the independence of India and Pakistan. We hardly had a bureaucracy or an army. Our money was being held up by the Indians because after independence they were supposed to give us some money, which they owed it to us, but they were holding it up. And Gandhi even had a fast for that. And the Quaid-e-Azam, look at his vision. He said, Pakistan is the pivot of the world placed on the frontier where the future geopolitics of the world will revolve. And today you can see we are, through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and our location and our role, the hub of a new regional connectivity. What I call, it's no longer South Asia, it's Greater South Asia, a geo-economic concept. Because South Asia just includes Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives. Greater South Asia includes China, includes Myanmar, includes Iran, includes Afghanistan, includes the Central Asian republics of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. And also now you can see the Gulf Cooperation Council also, whether it's Bahrain or UAE or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Oman. So geoeconomics is shaping the emergence of Greater South Asia. And the third most important development, to which others also alluded to, is the transformation of the Indian state from a secular, pluralist polity. Because India is a huge country, a great country, with a diverse heritage in terms of religions, ethnicities, culturals, and so forth. And that transformation is a very dangerous transformation into, as it was mentioned. And I'll give you two examples from the Western media, what they have said. On 23rd January, just last month, The Economist had a cover story. It was called Intolerant India. And what was the bottom line of that cover story? Please read that. Because that's not Pakistani propaganda, or it's not that what Pakistanis are saying. It's what the West is saying. Intolerant, they said, Modi is trying to transform India into, and I quote, Intolerant India says, a chauvinist Hindu state. They are being polite. Actually, it's fascist. But anyway, chauvinist Hindu state. And then, the top English writer of India, a very brave lady, Arundhati Roy, who lives in New Delhi. She doesn't live in Islamabad. She doesn't live in London. She lives in India. Won many prizes. She wrote an article, op-ed, in the New York Times on 15th of August, 2019. Please note, the New York Times, August 15, 2019, 10 days after Modi's action of August 5th. Arundhati, Arundhati, first word name, Roy, last name. Just because you're all scholars, and I'm sure you're on the internet all the time. She wrote, silence is the loudest sound. And what did she say? I'm just quoting, quote unquote. She says Modi's action in Kashmir has a whiff of colonialism in the air. She uses the term colonialism in the air. One. Second, she says in India today, what Ambassador Afrasia was saying, quote unquote, the RSS is the state. RSS are the killers of Mahatma Gandhi. And the godfather of RSS, who masterminded the killing, his name was Savarkar, you mentioned that, he is being honored with the highest civil award of India, Bharat Ratna. So you can see the mindset of those people. And then she says, Modi's regime is trying to erect, and I quote, an architecture of fascism in today's India. This is Arundhati Roy. This transformation of the Indian state is disastrous for the Indian people, who have a great civilization, who have a great history, with whom we would like to coexist as equal neighbors, friendly neighbors. Our father of the nation, Quaid-e-Azam, was asked, what kind of relationship you want with India? He said the same one which the US has with Canada. There's two sovereign countries, neighboring countries living peacefully. But what they have done, it's not just Kashmir. The Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register also of Citizens, where you are placing people on religious lines. Somebody asked me recently, a foreign television station, about Kashmir, and this was last week. I said, today, you are marking the 75th anniversary of the Auschwitz concentration camp, which was a Nazi camp. And I've been to Auschwitz in Poland, where people were marked for death because of their religious background. Jews, they were gassed. I said, this is now what they're trying to do in a modern way. And when you talk of RSS, please see their videos. They wear brown knickers, khaki knickers, white shirts, and the salute of the Nazis was Heil Hitler. Their salute is this. They've given a variation. It's like this. Modi is also one of the people who does that. So this is, their inspirations are those, the European fascism of the 30s. Now, where are we headed in this region? Three statements are very relevant which were last week issued. Three different statements. Modi said that we can take on Pakistan and have a war and win the war in 7 to 10 days. Last year, on 26th of February, the Indian Air Force violated Pakistan's territorial integrity, crossed into Pakistan for the first time after 71. Within 12 to 20 hours, we hit back, shot down 2 of the planes, captured the pilot, returned the pilot within 48 hours, to show that we have the capability and the will to defend our core interests, which means our sovereignty and our territorial integrity. And full marks to the Air Force for that prompt action, which is of professionalism. So he knows. And what is happening in India today? 2 historical decisions of Pakistan have been vindicated. One, the creation of Pakistan as a homeland, and that we can live and breathe freely as free people of a free country. Thanks to the Quaid-e-Azam, the founding fathers of Pakistan, who achieved this country through the right of self-determination, through the ballot box, through a popular vote, through elections, Muslim self-determination. And then 40 years later rather, the decision of 1998, we became a nuclear power. We followed India. India became a nuclear power because of their status. They wanted to have great power status. We became a nuclear power because of security, self-defense. We've had a threat which has been there. Today, by the grace of the Almighty, because of this deterrence, Mr. Modi cannot carry out his threat because he knows there is the balance of terror in South Asia which works. And conventionally also, we have the capacity and the will to hit back. The second statement was made by Pompeo, the US Secretary of State. He called China the central threat of our times, which means, and he says this is bigger threat than Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which means they have decided on a new Cold War. roping in the Indians to take on China. The issue is, and now they even have changed the name of Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific. India is not part of the Pacific. India is part of the Indian Ocean. But say Indo-Pacific to pacify India, to rope in India. And if you see the top 10 banks of the world, 4 are Chinese. If you see the top 20 internet companies of the world, 9 are Chinese. 30% of global growth is fueled by China. Huawei is competing 5G more than America, artificial intelligence. So they see that as a threat. And the US is not able to compete with them otherwise, so they conjure up a new. Every few years or decades, the Americans have to conjure up a new enemy. They had the Soviet Union in the Cold War. After the collapse of communism, then Islam came in handy. Although Islam and they were allies against the Soviet Union. But soon after that, when the Soviet Union lost the war and we helped them win the war, and the Afghan people and the Pakistan people made sacrifices, suddenly they talked of a clash of civilizations. From Harvard University, Mr. Huntington came with this thesis. Not from any mullah from any Muslim madrasa. It was a professor from Harvard University who talked of clash of civilizations. And which civilization is talking about? The Western or the Christian civilization, the Islamic civilization, and the Confucian civilization. China was already there in the hit list. And now the military-industrial complex of the Americans needs a new enemy. They need. So that is a very grave threat, and we feel that Asia can no longer be a scene of another Cold War. And then the third development has been what happened in the White House. Trump and Netanyahu, the deal of the century. This is not a deal of the century. This is a total fraud, because this is a plan for greater Israel. Be very clear. Whatever the Zionist lobby wanted, whatever, it is to bail out Netanyahu in the upcoming elections of 2nd March, and also Trump needs the Israeli lobby for his own re-election after this impeachment thing is over. And you can see the settlements have been legalized. Jerusalem is recognized as the capital of Israel. And they say we will make Al-Quds. It's like saying Islamabad goes somewhere else and Bani Gala is Islamabad, for example, or some such thing. A small enclave outside Islamabad, we make that Al-Quds. And then within the so-called there's autonomous Palestinian state they talk about will come after 4 years subject to Israeli clearance, who control the security and the police. And there are 15 different enclaves of Jewish settlers with 600,000 Jewish settlers in that part of the West Bank. And they will link West Bank and Gaza through tunnels and bridges and so forth. So this is creating, those of you who come from South Africa, you know the history. Who is from South Africa? Yes. You know about Bantustans, how they try to carve them out. The mindset is the same, apartheid. Divide. Divide and conquer, divide and rule, and split. That is what they are trying to do. So this is obviously a recipe for disaster, a recipe for conflict. The reason I mentioned Palestine is because the same formula they would like to use for Kashmir. Transform a majority into a minority. And they've also said, oh, we have given a big concession. Part of Israel will go to the new Palestinian state. Which part of Israel is that? Where the Arabs are in a majority. 20% of the population of Israel is Arab. 1.2 million. So that is the concern. Demographic change through diktat. And that is something which cannot be acceptable under any norm of international law. So we are looking at a situation where human rights violations, where use of force, 1 million Indian troops are currently occupying the valley of Indian occupied Kashmir, which is the highest soldier-civilian ratio in modern warfare. And today is 184 days after the curfew, clampdown and control of occupied Kashmir. 184 days. So this, you can see the scenario which is emerging. Pakistan is a peaceful country. We have fought the most successful inland war against terrorism in any Muslim country after 9/11. We have shown our doors are open. We even welcomed Bosnian refugees. 3,000 of them stayed in Pakistan when they were being ethnically cleansed in 1992, 93, 94. We have supported people in Africa, Asia, I mentioned the Middle East and so forth. And we would like that in this region we can build a better tomorrow. And we have seen the resilience of South Asia. It's not just Pakistan. Look at the people of Afghanistan who have struggled and who have bounced back. Look at the people of Nepal. I've been going to Nepal regularly. Who's from Nepal? कैसे हैं आप? ठीक है? And my sister was head of the World Bank in Nepal, and she used to living in Sitapaila. So I used to go there for my vacation every time. And I know Prachanda, I know Mr. Kohli and or Mr. Krishna Bahadur Ali and Mr. Ramesh and Madhav Kumar Nepal and other friends, you know. So Nepal is a very great country. Look at the transition they've made from civil war to peace, from monarchy to republic, from unitary country to a federation, from dictatorship to democracy, all on their own. Look at Sri Lanka. Who is from Sri Lanka? Is somebody from Sri Lanka there?
There is one lady, but she's not here right
Okay, that's no problem. So Sri Lanka also has made the transition. These are countries that shows their resilience, their toughness. That they fought the most ferocious terrorists. And that was the first example of cross-border terrorism in South Asia. The terrorists of Sri Lanka were sponsored by India, Indian intelligence, as they did later on against Pakistan also. So you see, we are facing that problem. And we face the problem, we combat the problem, and then we overcome that problem. So for the future, of course, it's a battle of ideas, a battle of narratives. We are having, 3 days ago, there was a long session at the Foreign Ministry. I was also one of the persons invited by the Foreign Ministry, and we discussed the future strategy. Pakistan's commitment to the Kashmir cause is very clear. It's a popular, spontaneous, widespread, and indigenous uprising. Resistance to a repression by the Kashmiri people. We stand by them, and they have the right to resist under international law, which they are doing. And most of the resistance, by the way, is peaceful. And a lot of people have suffered. Almost 100,000 casualties in the last 30 years. But the resistance remains. We will remain committed to that. Our parliamentary diplomacy will work on that. And also our think tanks and other areas, we will take the initiative forward. I would like to compliment the Islamabad Policy Research Institute for taking this initiative. I have a personal affiliation with this because, as he mentioned, when we became a nuclear power, we realized that the battle of ideas, the battle of narratives is coming. And it's not about the army or the foreign office or fighting, it's the fighting through the battle of ideas. And think tanks are a key element in that. So I'm glad that IPRI, which we founded 2022, is thriving, is blossoming, and especially under your leadership, sir. And it's also expanding physically, I see. So that's a good sign. And more power to the think tanks. And I also wish the think tank of Admiral Sadat, I saw you invited us very kindly, Center for Aerospace Studies, because this is the first of the Air Force also. So this is a think tank without a khaki tinge. It has a bluish tinge, sky blue. So that is there. And Rana Sahab, your think tank also, and others. So ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you to Pakistan. Pakistanis are a very warm and welcoming people, and you'll find that hospitality here. And we also, when we go to your countries, we find that hospitality and that warmth also. So I hope you have a very pleasant stay, and when you return home, you have pleasant memories and you have good experiences, and I wish you the best both in your personal and professional life, the ladies and gentlemen who are there. And thank you for inviting me and honoring me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
We can take 1 or 2 questions and then.
The participants from Solomon Islands to Sudan or Palestine to Mauritania or Ukraine or Bulgaria, whatever.